I learned the sound of betrayal before I learned the word for it. It sounds like a phone buzzing at dawn with no greeting. It sounds like your name typed by someone who thinks it belongs to them. My name is Evelyn Hart, and at 6:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, my mother sent me a single sentence that split my life cleanly in two. Wire the money today, or I tell your board what you did. No hello? No explanation. Just a threat, paired with a blurry photo of a contract bearing a signature that looked like mine if you squinted hard enough. I didn't squint. I set my coffee down gently because panic leaves fingerprints. I'm 34, a regulatory analyst at a healthcare firm in Boston, and my job is to find where rules are bent until they break. Fear is a tell. I don't give tells. I opened my laptop and logged into the compliance archive. I didn't hack. I didn't sneak. I followed policy like a priest follows scripture. The document in the photo was a vendor authorization one. I had never approved to route funds to a shell supplier that, according to our logs, had been accessed from a device labeled Lena's iPad. Lena is my younger sister. Brilliant at first impressions. Allergic to consequences. The access time was 2:47 a.m. The answers to my security questions, flawless. Childhood trivia weaponized. The knot in my chest didn't tighten. It settled. Understanding is colder than shock. The amount my mother demanded, $62,000, wasn't a loan. It was a ransom. She wasn't asking me to help. She was asking me to disappear the evidence and call it love. I saved the logs, exported the metadata, and archived the messages. Then I noticed something I'd been avoiding for months. An internal posting flagged priority transfer. Seattle, director track. A clean start I'd postponed out of loyalty that now looked like habit. Guilt is a leash. I'd been walking myself. As I packed, memory lined up like receipts. The time I covered Lena's credit cards just this once. The night my mother cried about reputation. Wow, I wired money and swallowed questions. I wasn't the favorite. I was the firewall. And firewalls are blamed when breaches happen, even when they hold. I replied with care. I'm scared, I wrote. I'll add Lena to the account so she can fix it in person. I'm leaving town tonight. The lie was surgical. To touch the money, Lena would have to show her ID, sign forms, and ask on camera. Not a rescue, a record. My mother responded seconds later. Do the right thing. I smiled without humor. In my world, right means documented. The suitcase clicked shut. I wasn't running. I was repositioning. The morning I left Boston, the city looked staged, too crisp, too polite. Like it didn't know what was about to happen. At the airport lounge, I watched rain stripe the windows while my phone rested face up, obedient and quiet. I'd learned long ago that silence can be louder than shouting. At 8:59 a.m. Pacific Time, the Seattle office opened. At 9 o'clock, my sister walked into the downtown branch wearing borrowed confidence in my last name like a passcode. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew the choreography. I'd written it. I logged into the compliance portal and toggled a setting most people never notice. Until it matters. Identity compromise active. It froze the account, flagged the terminal, and routed an alert to corporate security with my case notes attached. Not an accusation. A sequence. Timestamps. Device IDs. A map of intent. The teller would smile, stall, and say the system needed a moment. The doors would lock on a delay designed for robberies, not families. Cameras would do what cameras do best, remember? My phone lit up. She's there. Don't screw this up, my mother texted. There it was, the reflex to command, the assumption of compliance. I didn't respond. I'd learned that explanations feed entitlement. Minutes later, another buzz. Why is this taking so long? Then a third. Answer me. The rain thickened. Somewhere between the third and fourth message, security would have arrived. I imagined Lena at the counter, tapping her nails, rehearsing indignation. She'd say my name like a spell. She'd insist. When insistence failed, she'd pivot to charm. When charm failed, she'd reach for the story she'd practiced all her life. I made a mistake. I was told to fix it. I didn't know. But the system doesn't care how convincing you are. It only cares whether the pieces line up. And they did. At 9:17, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification, new message from legal. They'd pulled the records, contacted the branch, and confirmed law enforcement had been notified per policy. The words were careful, bloodless. You did the right thing. It landed with the weight of permission I hadn't known I needed. Another text came through short, panicked, misspelled. They're calling the cops. Then silence. I powered my phone down and watched a plane taxi past the window, its engine notes steady, unbothered by gravity. I thought about the years I'd confused endurance for virtue, about how often family had been used as a verb in action done to me, not with me. When boarding was called, I stood. The agent tore my ticket with practiced ease. As I walked down the jet bridge, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt accurate. Truth has a posture. It stands up straight. By the time we lifted off, I'd already signed my transfer paperwork. Seattle wasn't an escape. It was a recalibration. Somewhere behind me, consequences were learning my sister's handwriting. Somewhere else, my mother was discovering that leverage evaporates when you try to squeeze air. I leaned back as the seatbelt light dimmed. And for the first time in years, I didn't brace for impact. Seattle greeted me with salt air and a sky that couldn't decide what it wanted, which felt honest. On my first day, I took the long way to the office, walking past ferries and glass towers that reflected a version of me. I was still getting used to upright, unhurried, unafraid of my own shadow. Legal followed up before lunch. Charges filed, evidence preserved, protective boundaries documented. They didn't ask me how I felt. They asked whether I needed anything. That was news. That was enough. The fallout arrived in fragments. A voicemail from a cousin who just wanted to understand. An email from an aunt that said family should stay private, as if secrecy were a virtue instead of a solvent. I archived without replying. Clarity doesn't require consensus. It requires consistency. Each message I didn't answer felt like setting down a weight I'd been carrying since childhood, the belief that my worth was measured by how much damage I could absorb without complaint. Weeks later, I learned the details I hadn't needed. Lena took a plea. The records spoke louder than her apologies. My mother's threats were transcribed, time-stamped, stripped of tone until they read like what they were, instructions. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. Closure, it turns out, is less a door slamming than a quiet room where nothing asks you to explain yourself. Work filled the space where anxiety used to live. I built teams. I designed controls. I taught junior analysts how to read between lines without inventing stories. On Fridays, I bought myself flowers and learned the names of my neighbors. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I started sleeping through the night. The body keeps score, but it also learns when the game is over. One evening, standing at my window as the city dimmed into itself, I thought about the version of me who would have paid the money and called it peace. I didn't judge her. She did the best she could with the rules she'd been taught, but rules can be revised. That's the point of governance. You identify what fails, you document the risk, and you change the system before it collapses again. I didn't cut ties out of spite. I cut them out of precision. There's a difference. Love that demands self-erasure isn't love. It's a dead instrument with compounding interest. I'd paid enough. When my new team celebrated a successful audit with cheap cake and bad jokes, I laughed harder than necessary and meant it. This was what safety felt like, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of boundaries. If there's a lesson here, it isn't about revenge or escape. It's about alignment. When your values and your actions finally match, the noise fades. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop confusing loyalty with surrender. You choose the jurisdiction of your own life and file the paperwork to make it real. I didn't lose my family that year. I found myself, and once found, I kept me.